Ladies and gentlemen, let's press this button. Ooh, okay. Ladies and gents, we are live. This is the Hot Pole Position podcast, and I'm your host, Adam Steele. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all, although as of this time, YouTube is telling me that nobody has tuned in, but that's probably it lagging as it usually does. Typical. I am on my own this week because Liam, my usual co-host, is still in the south of Spain because he's just been married. And I was there last week, pretty much exactly this time last week, which is why there wasn't a podcast last Thursday, because, well, by 8 p.m. UK time, which is 9 p.m. Spanish time, this time Thursday, we were already in the wedding reception, having those two already tied the knot. So, being the best man at the wedding, I was a little busy to do a podcast. Apologies about that, but we're here this week. Tried to get Liam on this week, but the Wi-Fi where he is isn't great because he's still there, and I'm back home. So, it's good to be back, and we're using all new technology this week. Hopefully, this will go nice and smooth. We're using OBS instead of XSplit for those nerds that are interested, and so far it seems to be going much smoother. There's been no frame drops, processors aren't screaming at me. Everything seems to be going nice and smoothly so far, but if the whole thing crashes, well, we'll put that down to experience. So, without further ado, let's launch into the first topic for this week, which is, as it has been for the last few weeks, Gibson. Gibson are our first topic, as they have been recently. It's like with tech websites talking about Facebook constantly. It's just a thing. They're that big. It's going to happen. So, Gibson have finally done themselves a bit of good with PR. They have given the Oberheim trademark back to Tom Oberheim. If you've not heard of Oberheim, in the 80s, their synths were on everything. I'm a massive Rush fan, and one of their most iconic songs, Subdivisions, that's all Oberheim. Jump by Van Halen, that big that's an Oberheim synth. And also, as a good example, Blue Monday by New Order, that whole that's an Oberheim DMX drum machine, back in the days when drum machines were a big deal. So, yeah, many years ago, Tom Oberheim, his company name was sold off, and so he's been trying to get it back for a long time. And the CEO of Gibson, now the new guy, JC, just went to him and said, hey, have your trademark. It's not doing us any good. It's not making us look good having this thing. So, take it. As far as I'm aware, he didn't sell it back to him. They just gave it to them. Which, as far as PR moves go, I think that's absolutely fantastic. So, with all the bad press that Gibson have had recently, good on them for doing something positive for a change, because God only knows they needed it. Yeah, after 30 years, Tom Oberheim says he's thrilled to once again be able to use the Oberheim trademark. He's been making synths, just under different names, and yeah, so now the fact that they can do that again, yeah, big plus for them. And in a related news article, because it's been a couple of weeks, Gibson have shifted from confrontation to collaboration. And apparently they're working with some boutique builders. So, moving away from Gibson now, I don't want to linger on them for too long. You can now pre-order Behringer's version of the ARP Odyssey. Now, an ARP Odyssey, their Odyssey synth would have cost you thousands back in 1972. And even now, if ARP were to make you one, it would cost you thousands. Behringer are somehow, and Behringer again, doing this for £399, so roughly the equivalent in dollars, plus your sales tax wherever you are. So you're probably looking, sales tax and everything all told, at $500 for an all-analog synth. a proper like early 70s design synth. That's ridiculous. Hello to the guys in the chat who are now actually appearing. Good to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yes, so they're expecting another large badge by the end of the month. Not sure what that means, but that's probably a mistranslation from the German. Okay, I'm hoping I'm coming through loud and clear this week. Like I said, I've switched to using OBS rather than XSplit. And good audio nerd thing to talk about, OBS allows you to have things like compressors, limiters, gates, EQs, all sorts of stuff on separate audio channels, which is absolutely incredible. It even allows you to have VSTs on each separate audio channel, which is something I intend to do in the future. Didn't do for today, but I did put a gain boost digitally on it, and then I put a limiter on, so it's not going to clip at any point, but it is going to be nice and loud, and that means that when it comes to making the MP3 version, I'll literally be able to just convert this to MP3 and fire it out with absolutely no processing required, no time taken, which is always a good thing. I was hoping that OBS would export me an MP3, but it just threw an error at me, so I don't know if I need to get a separate plugin for that doesn't come shipped with it, or with it being open source, these kind of things are the things you run into. But being a nerd, I'm okay with that. I mean, yeah, oh right, teething issue. Oh, that's a point, I never did run the intro video. So, I got ahead of myself there, let's run the intro video. And back to me. So now I'm getting messages on the Fastbooks. Where am I? Oh, I'll be parenting. Someone's asking any news in regards to Bulgaria. No. I mean, I'm not sure what I should be expecting from Bulgaria. There's a thing they put out a few weeks back, a couple of days back even, about how they design their products. That's about it as far as I can see. What am I like at giving vocal tips? Asking for a friend. I don't tend to give out vocal tips on the internet. It is something I do as part of my studio production, but the reason that I don't do that is everybody claims to be a vocal teacher on YouTube, and I could start doing React videos and all that crap. But most of that, I think, is just fawning over people and saying how good they are, or criticising people when you don't necessarily know what you're talking about. I am a classically trained singer, and I also do a lot of rock opera type stuff. But generally speaking, I tend to give relevant advice to singers once they're in my studio, once they've warmed up with their own routine, started to sing the piece of music that we're working on, because then I have the most important thing of all, which is context. Context is massively important, because if I can sit down with an individual and go, where do you want to go with this? How are you not getting there? Or are you getting there? Because if you are, I don't need to add anything. Quite often, I find the best thing to do with a good singer is stay out of their way. But with someone who needs a bit of help, I will help them. Again, studied music theory at university. If someone's not getting a harmony part, I can work a diatonic part out for them. I can work block harmony out with them. I can have the conversations about, do you want a higher harmony? Do you want a lower harmony? Do you not want any harmonies? Did you want to do an octave? You know, do you need to be more forceful? Do you need to be softer? But that's very personal. And then if a singer finds that they can't reach a certain thing, then I talk technical. Then we talk about technique. Because filling someone's head with technique as they're about to record for a studio session is generally a bad thing. Because then they're not focusing on the song and they're not feeling the song. Now, with a completely professional singer, you can usually talk technical with them, but usually with an experienced professional singer, they don't tend to have many issues in the studio. So it's one of those things that I'm not a singing teacher who teaches how to sing. I've always said that, especially in the studio, I'm more of a, I guess, I hate to use words like guru, but it's that kind of thing where I expect a singer to have a certain level of competency when they come in, or if they don't, that's fine as long as I'm aware beforehand. But it's, what is your goal? Where are we going? Because my intention is always to capture a performance on record. If they take something away from that and they're a better singer for it going forward, great. And that's always a good thing. But that's not what I'm a specialist in, because of my experience of being a studio engineer as well as being a singer. I don't focus on, well, you need more vibrato or whatever. That's the kind of thing that can make someone not focused on what they're doing rather than focused. I mean, if you've got a month to go away and practice, sure, but generally when someone comes into the studio, that time has passed. So, yes. And if I was to give vocal tips to somebody over the internet, the first thing I would do is get them on a Skype call and go, sing for me. Or send me a recording of something you've done, which, especially if it's a recording with proper headphones, microphone, everything set up, will be different to them singing in a room. So, there you go. What's my go-to amp sim? Depends what I'm doing. I've recently really started to fall in love with the Slate THU stuff. But then I still use a lot of Kazrogs amps depending on what I need. I quite often use the Vadim Taranov 5150 because that's one of the most realistic 5150 emulations that I've heard in one position. If you're on the red channel and everything's pretty much at noon with some slight tweaks, it sounds scarily close, but doesn't do anything else. But if I want a 5150 sound, that's what I want, right? But yeah, the Slate THU stuff has really impressed me. I've not had much time to sit down with it. Last month or so, I don't think I've even used... No, I used an amp sim once. I think it was the Slate one, and I was impressed. But generally... recently, I've not been using amp sims because I've got a 2 Notes captor, which is the load box, and I work a lot with 2 Notes. I've been using them, and so I've got things like a PV6505, a real one, and I'll cart one of them around and use that. It's been rare recently that I've recorded at home at all. And in the studio, well, that's what the studio's for. Thank you, Marty. Hot Pole Rules. Yeah, cool. And so I like that more than the BandLab version. Not used the BandLab version at all. Sorry, guys. Not even opened BandLab Cakewalk. Not because I refuse to or I don't like it or anything like that. I'm just so flipping busy recently. Not had a chance to check that out at all. If I get some time, I will. At some point tonight, I might talk about the list of videos that I've got planned, because I've got at least 7 that I'm trying to script right now. I think if we break down the Reaper series, I think I've got 12 videos that I want to film and no time to film them. I do have... so the old tubes versus new tubes video just came out last week. I've got 2 more that are ready to go, so thankfully even though I've been absolutely slammed, I've got stuff in the bank, as it were, because I've got a video that went out to my patrons last week, which is titled "The SM58 Sucks," and it's very kind of clickbaity title, quite incendiary, but it's a discussion on how the audio industry has moved forward and the humble SM58 has not. And then there's one coming out probably Monday or Tuesday. What was the title of that again? Oh, yes! The 2 Notes Cab M review. That's ready to go. And I was really impressed with that. You can control it from your phone or your iPad. And it sounds great, and it's tiny, and is going on my new bass pedal board, which is about the size of the moon. Because ironically, now I'm not regularly touring with a band, I feel like I can be a bit extravagant and put a big board together, whereas when I was doing regular tours, I had to make everything compact so it was really efficient, so I had really quick load-ins. Now I don't care about that, because if I'm going to go out and play with a band, it's on my terms, on my time. Anyway, so what's my DAW of choice? Reaper, always Reaper, every time, blows everything out of the water. That's what I've felt for nearly 10 years now. That's not an exaggeration. I got Reaper early in version 3 because I was fed up of some of the routing issues that Cubase had at the time. And Pro Tools, again, at the time, nearly 10 years ago, was ludicrously expensive, clunky, and crashed a lot. Oh, and that's right, at the time, Pro Tools did not work with ACO devices or basically anything other than either a stupid M Audio M-Box, which were terrible, or Pro Tools' own hardware. Pro Tools is fine. I mean, it's fairly competent. It's got its issues, but I mean, it's fine. I don't really use Macs, so Logic's kind of out for me, although Logic 9 was so horrifically mentally scarring that when Logic 10 came out, I spent so long not using Logic 10 that I was kind of out of the game, and then by that point I thought, well, why would I buy a Mac if I don't even use their software? Again, I know plenty of people who use Logic 10 and get a lot out of it. I have nothing against people who get lots out of it, because I'm not of a negative mindset. If you get what you need out of a program, fantastic, great. And I would love to be a master of all of these DAWs. I really would, but a human only has so much time in the day, and I found, for me, if I need to get detailed work done now, no matter how complex, Reaper is the one for me that I can do everything in the shortest amount of time. You want me to produce an entire album in one project, I can do it. You want all the stems for all the tracks in an entire album's project, I can click all the buttons, get that rendering in 30 seconds, come back in 2 minutes, and everything's done. So on and so on. That's the kind of thing that other programs don't keep up. And that's the thing. DAW should be trying to keep up with me. I shouldn't be waiting and trying to find things in menus and, oh, I've got to know 200 keyboard shortcuts. And, you know, because I do know people who are very fast with Pro Tools, but they've spent years having to muscle memorize all these key shortcuts, and they're like a little wizard. And I don't really need to do that with Reaper. I know where everything is, but there's 5 ways of finding each button, and you know, it's quick. I think Reaper's going to get bigger and bigger over the years. Like Photoshop became popular not just because it's the standard, but because there's 5 ways to do everything, which means it suits your style no matter who you are. I think that's the angle Reaper's coming from. That no matter what your style, I mean, you can colorize and theme Reaper to look like Pro Tools if you want. You can make it look like the Starship Enterprise if you want, if that's your thing. Not my thing, but it's someone's thing. And it's so open and so compatible with everything. And it very, very rarely crashes on me. So that's my answer. And hello, David. Hello, people in the chat. So let's move back to the news, and I'll field some more questions later on. So this one is relevant to me. The Focusrite group, who I have done a little bit of conversation with in the distant past, by Adam Audio, who I have talked to much more recently, and whose speakers I've used since 2008. Because I would have used them earlier, but I had to save up to buy my very first pair of Adam A7s.